Hi, everyone. I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm here today with Nimisha Mukerji, the filmmaker who directed the distinctive and disturbing fourth episode of the eight-part Hulu limited series docudrama Under the Bridge that premiered May 1st. The episode premiered May 1st. The series stars Lily Gladstone and Riley Keough. However, that episode entitled Beautiful British Columbia features neither Gladstone nor Keough. It instead exists as a series of flashbacks prior to the real life murder at the center of the series, that of 14-year-old Rena Verk on November 14th, 1997. Nimisha, talk about the vibe you were looking to convey in the episode and what drew you to want to direct it.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. I mean, I think you set up the series so perfectly just now. I was drawn to episode 4, Beautiful British Columbia, because it's the one episode where Rena's alive for the episode. It's not none of the pieces of the story are taking place after her murder. This is all occurring, before. And to me, that was really important because it gave us a chance to show, the cracks of light in the darkness of the story and highlight the love that existed within Rena's family and allowed us to see things through her point of view.
The series is based on the 2005 true crime book Under the Bridge by Rebecca Godfrey, who is herself depicted in the series by Keough. Were you a fan of the book?
I was a fan of the book, but I was also a fan. Rena's father Manjeet wrote a book, and I read that as well. And I'm a DGA, I'm a proud DGA member, but I also grew up in Canada and grew up in Vancouver. And so I was very familiar with this story. I'm the same age that Rena Verk was. We're born in the same year. And I experienced, bullying in high school. And so there's a lot of parts of the story I really, connected with. And so just through shared lived experience of being, South Asian, growing up in a very white suburban community. And so I think that, the story, my way into the story was really through Rena and her family. So I definitely drew on Rebecca's book, but also Manjeet's book as well.
So, yeah, as a Canadian woman of South Asian descent, you really could relate to some of the things that Rena and her parents, Suman and Manjit, went through. Um, when you say bullying, what was it? Was it just pure racism that you endured, that you encountered?
Yeah, I think that, as a young girl, as a teenage girl growing up in the 90s, the world was so different than it is now today. It was just sort of everywhere you would look, there were the idea of what does beauty look like? And it was always the same sort of imagery, blonde, blue-eyed, white, young girls. And so it was growing up in that environment, I there were all these subtle cues within society of what beauty is, what popularity, being a young girl, it's like Lord of the Flies, that idea that kind of is drawn into this story. I always used to say, like, pick if it was Lord of the Flies with girls, they would just get Piggy to kill herself. Like, that's the way young girls operate. It's vicious. They have a different way of fighting, and then, but in the series, what you see is like that builds up to actual real violence. But there's all this groundwork, and we see that in episode 4 in these dinner scenes. It's the first time that Rena has her friends over, and they meet her family, and you see what's happening, like what they've just, there's a whole plan put in action of why they go to her house in the first place.
Oh, I mean, it's just not to reveal any spoilers. I mean, I know that this will be shown after the premiere, but the episode is just harrowing to watch. I mean, it looks back at how Rena's parents got together and the controversial circumstances surrounding that, and how their teenage daughter ultimately fell in with this horrible crowd. And like you said, they had this whole plan of going and sort of sort of wreaking sort of subtle terror in her house and stealing things, and it's just hugely uncomfortable, which is, I guess, a testament to both to the script and to your direction as well as the acting. Of course, I kept wanting to look away and mute it. Um, uh, but does this hew pretty close to the way things really developed according to your understanding of the story?
Yes, I mean, the writer Stuti Malhotra, wrote an incredible script and really cared. She also is coming at it from, a South Asian female perspective, and she connected to this family and really brought an authenticity to the page. And that point of view of Rena, and then, like you mentioned, her parents' point of view and her grandparents' point of view, she was able to bring all of these things in to, within one episode, all these stories and this history. And then, again, Samir Mehta and Quinn Shepherd, as the creators and showrunners, were able to sort of, they guided it. So their leadership was so important. Yeah, I think it really started with the page though. And then, having such an incredible cast, like I've always loved Archie Punjabi, and it was such a dream to work with her and see some of those moments of her connecting with her daughter. And Ritika Gupta is like unbelievable as Rena. She
It
shines
really
through
is
this.
fantastic.
I mean, anytime you need a beat, you just cut to Rithika and her without saying anything, she's just watching and she's saying so much with her face. And Ezra Khan, of course, as her dad playing Manjeet. And then we had these other Elahi Rayani and Bali Gill playing the young Suman and young Manjeet. And they just came in for this one episode. But again, there was just such a sense of like really wanting to get the story right. And because it was based on truth and we knew that these things happened, what happened when Rena's family came, her grandparents came to this country, how did they experience racism? How did they experience that othering? Where did they find community? They found community through Jehovah's Witness. And then how did her parents, who came from different worlds, find a way to create a life together? So I really, really wanted to focus, as much as I could, bring in those moments of love that were in the truth of the story, as well as, all of the darkness.
I know we touched on the fact, you're being bullied, but how did your personal experiences inform the way you directed the episode? I mean, did you have any input into, I mean, I know you didn't write the script, Nimisha, but did you have any input into just the way things were played?
Yeah, I think, again, having lived through it, I've been a teenager and lived through it. And, I having bringing people to my own home, I remember as a teenager was, from the food to and again, I think there's so many things, a part of this collaboration where everyone works so hard to get it right, from the costumes to the production design, but to make it feel like, what does it feel like to come into that immigrant house? And as a young person, all you want to do is eat the, sandwiches on white bread and be just like everybody else. Especially in the 90s, I should say, like, I think things have changed and evolved in a beautiful way. But in the 90s, especially as a teen girl, you just want to belong. But what I loved about Rena, she not only wanted to belong, she wanted to stand out. And I think, again, I connected to it so much, like just from Rithika, playing Rena, singing to the Biggie. And, so you see her sort of, where is she free? When does she feel free? When does she feel caged? When does she feel loved? When does she feel afraid? Like, she's experienced all of these things. And for me, it was really taking the script and really trying to infuse that distinctive point of view through the camera, because there's the words on the page and then there's all those silent beats, and how do you pull those beats out, and how do you navigate the camera to highlight the points of view that you're trying to get across. So for me, it was, I think that I trusted myself with this process of making this really had me grappling with how far I've come from being a teenage girl to who I am today. And I am a mother now, so I have a young son, who's biracial. And so I was able to bring all the parts of myself to this. So it felt extremely personal. And I felt a great responsibility to get this right for Rena and for her family.
Was your ethnicity part of why you were hired for the job of directing that episode, do you think? I mean, did that come into play, or was it coincidental?
I think you're always trying to bring your when in working on a a limited series where each director is bringing a part of themselves to it. I came in right after Catherine Hardwicke, and I admire Catherine's work so much. And again, she understood how to bring that teenage female world to life, with her with 13. And so for me, I think that when I interviewed for this project and met with Quinn and Samir, and they told me about episode 4, I said that's the episode where I think I can contribute the most, because I understand that experience, and um I know I can bring something personal to the material, and I will give it 150%, because for me, again, it is close to my heart. The story has always stayed with me, and this feels like a chance to do something really special. So I think that no matter who you are as a director, you're always trying to bring your own point of view and your own heart to it.
Being sheltered in America here, Nimisha, and knowing little about life up north in Canada, I was pretty ignorant, I think, of the racism and ethnic prejudice, faced by immigrants of Indian heritage, in particular in British Columbia, and I suppose elsewhere in the country. Is it still a problem there? I mean, that may be a ignorant question as well. I mean, because I imagine there's a certain amount of when you're an ethnic minority, quote unquote. I guess it's an issue in every country.
Yeah, I think that, there's so many ways to make people feel othered, right? And I think that while there's been progress on many fronts, the fact that Under the Bridge is the story is being told now, I think speaks volumes to the way that our culture has changed, the way that we tell stories, the way that we place value on stories. Um, I think that I want to. This is a hard story to tell. It's hard, but it's so worthwhile to explore it. And I think that, again, I feel very grateful to live at this time, to be a director at this time where I can be part of telling stories like this, because I know that this didn't exist in 1997 when I was 14. So, and the story is true and takes place in Canada, in Vancouver. And I think that the racism that it demonstrates, is something that, we're still grappling with. There's been progress though, and I think that, you want to be a part of the change. And I think that, in telling these stories, it's powerful, and it has a powerful impact.
It is powerful for sure. What has your own experience been like, Nimisha, as a woman of color in the filmmaker's chair? Have you butted up against much discrimination personally?
I think, it's a competitive industry, and you have to be, you have to have so much passion, but you have to also have opportunities to show your work. The way that you become a better director is you direct. And I think that what has happened in the last 5 years, especially with more awareness, is that, maybe half the competition that was kept out of the running is finally allowed to come in and compete for those jobs. And again, offer up what their stories are and what they can bring that are strengths. Whereas before, might not have had access. I know for me, again, I started in documentary filmmaking, and then, was in the kids space, and like these were spaces that were more welcoming to, BIPOC directors, and especially women. But it's, been that slow, steady build of like, with every job really feeling a responsibility to do great work, because you want to make it easier for that next person that's trying to come in who is, you know, a BIPOC woman, that it's like, you know, if you don't see it, you don't believe it's possible, right? And so I think that the responsibility that comes, you know, for me, and I know Geeta Patel, I admire her work. She did the pilot. Like, you know, when you come into a project and you see that, you see someone like Geeta doing the pilot, it's so empowering because you feel like, okay, there is a place for our voices, you know, and again, I think that for me, it's been while it's been difficult, it's a hard industry to succeed in. So, you know, you go in going, I have to do and make every frame count. And that's the way that I've set out to, you know, build my career, is just do the work and then, you know, just be a part of the community as much as possible. And I've had incredible people, you know, help pull me up. And I think it's because of, you know, they see how much I care, and I've been able to show them through my work that, you know, I deserve to be here.
Yeah, you certainly don't get into this industry because it's easy. Huh? Um, uh, I know you have a lot of experience, as you just mentioned, Nimisha, in both doc and scripted. Do you use similar muscles for each, or does it differ your whole approach?
Working coming out of documentary was great because you learn how to work with non-actors, so you learn to build trust. You know, you can't force someone to be in a documentary. If you lose trust, the whole project falls apart. So it's like trust and access. And coupled with this idea that, you know, you always have to know, you have to always get those setups for those payoffs. And you have, you know, in documentary, you have to constantly be thinking about story and adapting. And so the having that became a superpower when I went and turned it towards scripted, because, you know, I think part of the reason I, you know, came up working with young talent is because I knew how to work with people who were still, you know, I knew how to bring out the best in people. And I think that that came from working in documentary. And again, I was thinking about the edit, you know, because there's, you know, time is always your enemy. In production, you're like, okay, I have limited time. How do I make my time count? And again, I think that having that training in documentary of knowing how I wanted to cut things together, what are the beats that are, you know, the most important. In my episode of Under the Bridge, there's an underwater shot. You know, that was going into production. That was the thing. I was like, we need to protect this. Like, this has to be protected. You know, we'll give up other things to make sure that we get that shot. And so it's like you go in not only just knowing what's important, but knowing how to communicate that to other people. Because again, communication is a big part of this job as well.
Absolutely. Talk about just before we wrap here, some of your filmmaking influences, how maybe their inspiration has informed your own work.
Yeah, you know, Catherine Hardwicke was a definite influence on me. Deepa Mehta, who's a Oscar, you know, nominated Canadian director, has had a huge influence on me. But I also grew up, you know, watching Spielberg's films, and I think that, you know, I was a child of the 80s, you know, so I I think what I learned from all of these directors is, again, you don't need to be put in a box. You know, you can go from 13 to Twilight, you know, and you know, the films of Spielberg, you can go from Indiana, you know, you can go from all of these, you know, Close Encounters to Schindler's List. It's like you have to just find a way into the story, and to me, like all those filmmakers, they were able to tell so many different kinds of stories and bring themselves to it. So you know, I have so many influences, but those are just a few of them.
You could do a lot worse than to use Steven Spielberg as kind of a yardstick, I think.
Love Spielberg.
No, I'm with you. Um, I think we're going to leave things there. New episodes of Under the Bridge premiere each Wednesday on Hulu through May 29th. Uh, Nimisha Mukerji, best of luck to you this Emmy season and every season. And thanks for joining us today at Gold Derby.
Thank you so much, Ray.